The Sandy and Toddcast is a Mind Garden media podcast in association with
Screw You, Todd
Productions. And here we go. It's another edition of the Sandy and Toddcast. And this one is something we've never done before, Sandy. We're actually kind of going back in time. It's like putting a tape on a tape recorder and hitting the rewind button.
It is, Todd. And it's really crazy because our first season was like night and day to our season 4 in so many ways. And so we thought we'd take a little walk down memory lane and talk about a topic that's still to this day and always will be a very hot topic.
Yep, it is all about Amityville. The episode's called Amityville Revisited. Season 4, Episode 3 is on the way next on the Sandy and Toddcast.
Tarot time. If you're listening to this podcast, the divine messages are definitely for you. Let's combine science and magic, shall we? Root cause analysis, business planning, counseling, and good old-fashioned intuitive tarot readings so we can improve your near future circumstances by addressing your present scenarios. Please follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. For more in-depth tarot consultations, please book your readings at positivetarotwisdom.com. Infinite love and blessings for everyone.
Broadcasting from two very different yet magical places not found on any map. Get ready to discuss the strange, weird, ghostly, crazy, spooky, and odd things that take place around us each and every day. All while having a little bit of fun. This is the Sandy and Toddcast.
Doing something a little different. I'm actually very happy we're doing this, but we're revisiting some of the episodes that we did in our very first season that didn't get a lot of listens because we were so new. And yet some of the topics are really, really good. So why not re-present some of this stuff?
You know, I have to say that this topic that we're discussing this week, the Amityville Horror, is hands down one of my favorite episodes that we've done yet. And it was only the second episode of the podcast, but we really, really dove in deep to the Amityville, gave our opinions, our thoughts, and I don't know about you, but really not much has changed for me in the past year. I still kind of feel exactly the same way I did, and I think it's neat to go back and revisit some of these episodes and see where we are now with them.
So we're gonna kind of update you on some stuff that we feel and things going on with Amityville, but then we're actually going to rewind a bit and actually play some of the audio from season 1. This for me, and I mentioned this in the podcast, this was where my interest in paranormal started, was the book coming out about Amityville and the movie coming out, because this was touted, in my mind, the very first time it was said, a true story, you know?
Yeah.
This was supposed to be true from start to finish. And so my thought process as a very young man at this point, but still, you know, old enough to understand what was going on in the movie, going, oh my God, maybe this is real.
Yeah, it was scary and fascinating and exciting all at the same time to me. I remember, here I am in the 70s. I was born in 1971, so I was a kid. And we didn't have access to a lot of paranormal, scary things back then. The Exorcist had come out, and now Amityville was out. I think Amityville was, 78? I think it was around there,
yeah,
maybe.
About that, maybe a little bit earlier. But, 76, 77, 78.
Yeah, like right around there. And even then, I was scared but fascinated by the whole thing. I remember watching the movie when I was a little bit older, and the part that stuck out for me was the Red Room, which truly the Lutzes will tell you wasn't as maybe crazy looking, and the story around it wasn't as crazy looking as it was in the movie. But again, it's a movie, so they sort of blow everything up, and you got to have drama and excitement. But I remember reading the book and just being scared and putting the book down and then picking it back up and starting all over again, where I left off because it just fascinated me. And between the Amityville Horror and In Search Of with Leonard Nimoy.
I was just going to say that was one of the things we did have as in our youth. That was always, sometimes there was some weird stuff on In Search Of. You're like, I'm not really all that interested. But you gave it the benefit of the doubt because it was one of those shows where you're like, oh, it's going to be something scary.
Yeah. And you know what, Todd? Because we had so little of that anything I just devoured. It was a lot like when I was a kid, I was a big wrestling fan, like WWE style wrestling fan. But you couldn't find wrestling on TV very much back then. And so you would, as a kid who's a wrestling fan, you would like devour anything that you could find wrestling. I watched Glow, Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling. WPIX out of New York City would have Glow. Or you'd watch the really late at night, the Mexican feed of the Mexican wrestlers. I mean, that's the kind of stuff. But it was the same with the paranormal stuff. You just eat up anything that you could find. And those were big ones for me.
This is not a video, so people couldn't see me shaking my head at you while you're talking about wrestling.
But, well, it's true. I still watch wrestling. I'm not as much into wrestling today, but Dave still loves it. So I've texted you a few times. You're like, what are you doing? And I'm like, roll my eyes. I'm watching wrestling and, that kind of thing. But I'll never get sick of the paranormal. The paranormal's in my blood. It's what I am. So
the thing about the Amityville Horror, there's so many angles to this. There's the family. There's the kids. There's the Warrens. There's the book. There's the movie. There's the subsequent years afterward where some people in the family said it was all fake. Then there was additional information that said it wasn't fake. It just wasn't exactly like the movie. Then you had people moving into the house who said nothing ever happened there. And, one of the things that I got stuck on in the last week, because once again, and I don't know if it was for sale when we did the last podcast, which again, you're going to hear audio from very shortly. But it's for sale again. And this time around, it's under $1 million for sale. The house in Amityville that housed all these stories. But the other thing that I always found interesting was how they found a house in New Jersey that was so similar
I know.
For the actual movie. The house for the movie was from New Jersey. And that's the house you see in the movie. That's the White House out on the lake and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And it was so similar to, what was going on in Amityville that they used it. Now, both houses, the real one and the fake one, which are, big tourist places to go to, have changed the siding. They've changed the third story windows to try and hide the fact that it's the Amityville house. The one used in the movie, on a Colonial, if you're looking at the side of the house we always see with the weird eye windows at the top, there's that kind of barn-like roof line. Right. They actually changed that in the TV movie to just be a regular sloped roof.
Right.
And they changed the way that the fireplace, the chimney is, because in the movie it came down and then it kind of spread out a little bit and was a little bit thicker at the bottom. They took all that down and put up just a straight chimney to try and hide the fact that it was in the movie because so many people come to look at it.
To this day, people walk by, they drive by. Can you imagine? Okay, now we had this discussion last week and I told you point blank, even if I had the money, I would not buy that house.
And I would. I
know you would. And I still don't understand it 100%, but I just feel like even if any negativity is gone, which is very highly possible, I don't think so much the house was haunted as I think the negativity was sort of in weird way invited in. But even if it's gone, I just don't know that I could be in something that went through that kind of, the murders and I just don't know that I could do that. I can
understand where you're coming from with that. The reason why it interests me is not because it's the Amityville house necessarily. It's because I love that kind of architecture.
I know
And
you
so
do.
if I ever had an opportunity to buy a colonial house that looked like that, I'd be all over it just because that's kind of what I'm into to a certain extent.
And that house to be right on the water like that is absolutely amazing. It's absolutely amazing.
So that would be my interest. Now, the fact that maybe something had happened there in the back of my mind would be kind of cool. Now, the difference between that and the Conjuring house, we know there's a lot of dark shit there.
Oh, yeah.
And so I would
We know it's still there. We know it's still there.
Right.
I don't necessarily think that the Amityville house has any negativity left. Like I said, I think that was invited in. And not even as much by the Lutzes. I think that was invited in by the original, what's his name? Now I can't think of it, of course.
Yeah, the D name, Defeo, right?
Defeo, yes, Roddy Defeo. I don't know why I could think of it. I think there was something going on there. I don't know if he and his sister were doing something. I don't know. That was the time. That was the time when that stuff was going on. So I don't know.
Right.
But what I do know is I don't know that there's necessarily any negativity left in that house. Maybe people like you and I would still be able to detect that. That's another thing that kind of makes me nervous. But I would go in there, but I don't think I could live there. I just don't think I could live there.
I would have to go look at it. I'd have to get the feeling for it, all that kind of stuff, just to kind of get an idea.
Yeah.
But it would be interesting to me to at least check it out. If I had $1 million to buy it, I would consider it.
Yeah. Maybe we should just dress up one day, really like high class when you come out, and we should drive down, road trip down, and we should take a walk through the house. Pretend we want to buy it. You never know.
Well, if it's still for sale at that point, absolutely.
We should. And I think it would be hilarious and we could check it out.
You know, the actress Margot Kidder that was in the movie, also, after the movie happened, she had a little bit of a mental breakdown in the early 90s as well. She kind of went a little nuts.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if that had something to do with the movie, if there were other stories of stuff that kind of stuck around or affected people, but we know even to this day, the kids of the family, the Lutzes, have had issues, and I'm not even necessarily paranormal, although it could be tied into that. Issues from living this life, from living there, living with their family, living with the fact that they were in the Amityville Horror house. That's a lot to take in. We were just talking last night about Christopher, right?
Yeah. I think that one thing that I find really interesting, Todd, is that so much was put upon the parents in the situation. Kathy Lutz and what's his face? George. I don't know what's wrong with me today. George and Kathy Lutz, so much spotlight was put on them. And obviously, for obvious reasons, the kids were sort of, kept out of the limelight as much as possible. But nobody ever really talked about the kids and what they went through. I mean, you've got 10-year-old, 8-year, you've got young kids going through something that I wholeheartedly believe they went through. And nobody ever really talked about it. And so that's got to take a toll. I'm sure they went through counseling. I'm sure they went through a lot of different things in their lives.
Maybe. But we don't know because, again, that was a different time. Maybe they didn't necessarily get the help they needed,
But I can't help but just feel this overwhelming, empathy and sadness for them because, they were just as much a player in the whole thing. Not just the house itself, but what went on afterwards. The media debacle, the accusations flying back and forth, having to feel like you have to defend your mother your whole life. My mother wasn't a liar. My mother wasn't this. My mother did that, didn't do that. I can't even imagine what it was like to grow up as these children in this situation. I mean, there's lawsuits. The lawsuits are still going on. There are still lawsuits going on from 40 years ago. It's crazy, Todd. And I just feel for the children, Chris especially, and all that he's had to go through, and feeling, I think, like he's had to defend himself, defend his family this whole time, and fight for the truth. And Chris and I have been friends for many years on Facebook now, and I see his posts, and I can see that he goes through a lot with this, and it's not his fault. So,
Well, I think if you take a step back and you look at the time when this story came out, the late 70s, any accusation that there was a haunting or there was ghosts or there was spirits or anything, people would think you were nuts. People thought that the Warrens were nuts, and whether you believed everything they did or kind of believed or at least have respect for whatever that is in today's day, back then they were very shunned. Well, now on any given night of the week, you can turn on TV shows that basically follow what they've been doing, and the same with haunted locations. Now we watch a haunted location on one of these TV shows on Discovery Plus or Travel or whatever the hell it is, and you go, oh my God, that poor lady. Or, oh my gosh, that family, those kids dealing with that. Back then, people were going, these guys are crazy. What are they doing, There was no empathy for the family at all, whether something really happened or whether or not the dynamic of the family just really sucked and it was bad for the kids. Nobody had any empathy for them for a long time.
That's a really good point that I never really thought of it like that before, but everybody wants a good story, a great movie. They want to be scared. They want to be terrified, but they don't want to think that it could be true, especially back then. So they had to have been lying. They couldn't be telling the truth. It had to have been made up back then, because who wants to think that that's really true, that evil spirits and negative energy and all of this stuff actually exists? They just want a good movie. They just want to get scared while they're eating their popcorn, and then they want to go to bed and move on with their lives. And I can see that culture back in the 70s.
Well, I think there's a little bit of that culture now, too, in that, and this kind of ties into people who call themselves paranormal researchers, and also ties into the Amityville thing, where you've got people out there researching and doing investigations who just want to go out and get scared. Who just want to be famous, who just want the attention that maybe doing that kind of thing gives you, instead of being very, very understanding the fact that this can mess you up.
Yeah.
Like you don't know what you're dealing with. So, we were talking about an individual and ties into the Amityville house and ties into paranormal research. Some guy who's got is it a fireplace grate or is it a heating grate or what is it?
I want to say it's a heating grate. I want to say it's a heating grate. It's not from the fireplace. It's a heating grate.
Okay. But he's got it. Like, this guy collects all sorts of paranormal stuff. And I understand that to a certain extent. But again, if you've got shit going on in your life, if bad things are happening, and then I'm saying, well, I'd buy the house, I'd live there. I don't know, I don't know if it's something you really want to mess with or not, but
I am all about, I used to, before I understood who and what, I guess I hate saying it this way, but who and what I am. I used to love going into antique shops and things like that, because I just love antiques, and I would go check them all out. And occasionally I'd bring something home. But once I became more educated, not only about myself, but about energy and attachments and things like that, I don't really do that anymore. I might go check them out, but I don't really buy antiques anymore. And in my thought process, there are two types of paranormal researchers, investigators. There are the ones that want to be famous, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, because there's not. If you want to be well known in the paranormal community and you want to be an Instagram, a TikTok star. You want to be on TV. You want to be the YouTuber that gets 8 gazillion hits.
I thought you were going to say a yoo-hooer. I'm like, what the hell is a yoo-hooer?
No, although maybe you want to be a yoo-hooer.
Maybe.
I don't know. If you want to do that, I think that's great. Go for it. Enjoy it. Some people have to be famous or we wouldn't be watching them on TV. But there's the other ones who are in it not just to get scared, not just to bring the entertainment, and that's where I fall, and I know you fall too. We just want to go in to try to understand. We want to try to help, whether it's a living or someone who's passed, a living person, someone who's passed. We want to help. We want to understand. We want to further this whole process. And I just, as someone who's on that side of the fence, I just respect that property. I respect what happened there. I respect the energy there enough to not want to mess with things. Call me afraid of it. I'm fine with that. But I don't want to mess with the energy. And for someone to take the grate, put it in their home, and then not understand why things are happening to them, I think is not only irresponsible, but ignorant. I mean, I'm just going to say it. It's ignorant. And you reap what you sow. Is that how you say it?
Yeah, you reap what you sow. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think, like, when it comes to antiques, obviously there's certain things that I like, and I collect some things as well. Mm-hmm. But I'm always very, very careful about the feelings I get around those pieces. Yeah. If I get any weirdness out of it, it's gone.
Mindful. I think that's a good word. I'm mindful of what I touch, because I can feel energy through touch. So I'm very mindful of what I touch when I go in those shops. I love them. I would hang out in antique shops all day if I could, because they're history. Right. That's all history right there. And you know how much I love history, but no, I'm like you. I'm just very mindful of what I do. And I don't know if I would be taking those kinds of objects and putting them out there for people to be a part of, participate in. You've seen the Warrens Museum. I mean, they don't let people even close to that stuff.
Yeah, I would not have a room in my home or anything like that with locked up stuff.
And I think John Zaffis has it. Doesn't John Zaffis have it, like in the barn in his backyard?
Yep.
And who, by the way, John Zaffis, much respect for. I love John Zaffis. I've met him and talked to him a couple of times now, and he is brilliant, and I love him. But he has a lot of guts to be able to do that. And he doesn't even let anybody in there except appointment only, and you can't touch anything. He has Annabelle the doll under like this glass case. That's respect.
Yeah. I don't think I could do that anyway.
I don't know. I couldn't either. I don't want to touch that stuff. I just don't want to touch it. I just have enough respect for it. That's all.
Well, we've basically mentioned that we love history. It's very important to us. So why don't we play a little history right now and rewind our lives to just over a year ago when we originally talked about the Amityville Horror. This is Season 4, Episode 3, Amityville Revisited.
Why not talk about the Amityville Horror this week? It's something that everybody knows. We all grew up with it. I don't think there's anybody who doesn't know what the Amityville Horror was.
In this day and age, I'm sure there are. However, I think there's fewer people who are unaware of it at this point, just because of all the national attention it got, just because of all the Hollywood attention it got. And I think because of there's more paranormal investigative information out there now. And so there's a lot of reference to it. So people who weren't around when this stuff kind of came out in the mid to late 70s at least have seen references of it in several movies over the years.
And I think also that whether you believe that it actually happened or you believed it was a big hoax, that any kind of discussion about it is going to elicit more talk about it, is going to make more people aware of it. And I do think, regardless of whether you believe it's true or not, I think it's very important to the evolution of paranormal research. And I mean, Ed and Lorraine Warren were involved in it. Hans Holzer was involved in it at one point. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. But some of the big names in paranormal research over the years were actually involved in this case. This was huge. So whether you believe it was true or not, it really helped in the evolution of paranormal research.
Right. And for me, I mean, it really was the door that opened, and I mentioned this in the last podcast. This was the event, this was the book, this was the movie that really started my awakening to finally believing that some of this stuff could be true, that some of this stuff does go on, that what we see, hear, feel, touch, smell on a daily basis isn't necessarily all that's going on out there. And as you're growing up and you hear bumps in the night and you're thinking of the monsters under your bed or in your closet, or you watch a spooky movie with the family and you go to bed and you don't sleep for days, and your parents say, "Oh, there's no such thing as a boogeyman," you know, the truth of the matter is there probably is something, and everybody's boogeyman is a little different. But for me, it was kind of the door that opened my eyes to a lot of new stuff.
Well, it's terrifying. It's terrifying. As a kid, it was terrifying to me to think that there was a pig named Jody in somebody's bedroom, that there were red eyes staring, into someone's bedroom from outside. And what really fascinated me even more, I think, was the whole Defeo thing, because that kicked it all off, or seemed to kick it all off. It's not just the Lutz family. Something weird went on with the Defeo family, too.
And quite possibly even before that. They may have been actually, that whole incident there where the family was murdered by one member of the Defeo family, that may have happened because of stuff that that happened many years before that. Who knows? Hundreds of years? You never know.
Honestly, that's my thought. Let's start out. I'm just going to give a little bit of background for anybody who needs a little bit more details on what happened. We'll start with the Defeos. The Defeo family consisted of Ronald Defeo Sr. He was 44 years old. Louise Defeo, his wife, she was 42. Ronnie Jr. was 23. They called him Butch. His sister Dawn was 18. Allison was 13. Mark 12. And John Matthew 9. Big family, lots of kids. They lived in this Long Island, Amityville, Long Island home right on the water. It's 112 Ocean Avenue, and we know that now it's not the same number. The number's been changed. Well, around 6:30 on Wednesday, November 13th, 1974, Ronnie Jr. entered a bar and he asked for help because he thought that his family had been shot. All of the victims had been shot with a .35 caliber Marlin around 3 a.m. that morning. The Defeo parents had both been shot twice. The children had all been killed with single shots. Now, it didn't really take the police long to start suspecting Ronnie, who was the only one who was still alive. He said it was probably a mafia hit at first because his father did some dealing with the mob, but the next day he actually confessed. He told them, quote, "Once I started, I just couldn't stop. It went so fast." At his trial, his defense was insanity, and he claimed that it was self-defense because he heard their voices actually plotting against him. On November 21st, 1975, he was found guilty on 6 counts of second-degree murder and given 6 25-years-to-life sentences. He's still alive. He's still in jail. He's still telling a million different stories. Every single time somebody talks to him, the story changes. A lot of controversies, obviously, surrounding this. One big thing is that the rifle was just shot. There was no silencer mechanism on it. And that's really interesting because how could he have shot the first 1 or 2 people, his parents, without the rest of them being woke up? They were all laying in their beds sleeping. There was no evidence of any kind of a struggle. They were just all sleeping in their beds. And none of the neighbors actually heard any of the gunshots, just the family's dog barking at the time. There were no signs of drugs in any of the victims because some people thought, well, maybe he drugged them. Absolutely no signs of drugs. There's no clear motive to this day. Ronnie has given several different versions of the murder, including one where he said his sister Dawn actually killed her father. Then their distraught mother killed the rest of the siblings, And that's when he says he killed his mother. The rest of the versions were just as crazy. There's several of them. I've watched a lot of his interviews over the years because he fascinates me. And yes, he's definitely crazy. But there are a lot of people who really believe that there was something there that influenced him in that house to murder his entire family. There was a lot going on there. You know, there was a lot of physical violence in that family.
Right. Not unlike a lot of families back at that time, I think, to be honest with you. I think that, you know, hitting the kids and all that kind of stuff, Dad was probably a little bit more over the top than he needed to be. And then, you know, that you talk about he was a little crazy. Then you wonder where that craziness came from. You know, did it come from just a psychological thing going on? Was it because of the family? Was there some sort of other energy there that created him or made him to become kind of nuts? One of the best websites that I have found on Amityville is actually AmityvilleMurders.com. And if you go there, it's got the story. It's got the pictures of the family. Stories about what happened after the shootings, and then actual pictures from the night when the cops got there. All of the scenes. So you see the beds with the blood in it, and you see, you know, the socks still laying on the floor in the bedrooms and all that kind of stuff. So if you want to see it and kind of get a feel for what it was like at that particular moment, I think one of the pictures, I got to double check this. I got to look at it right now. But one of the pictures, it still has the body laying in there.
That's just so disturbing.
Yeah, but if you want to check it out and kind of get a feel for what happened that night, yeah, you should check it out. AmityvilleMurders.com.
I'm so awful. I love that stuff. I hate to admit it and say it like that, but I just heard a story about the two hikers who disappeared in Panama in like 2013. And the first thing I had to do was go and search it and look for the pictures. And they found a foot in a shoe, and I had to look at that. I think it's, if you're investigative at all, if you're curious at all, those are great ways, and you can handle it. Those are great ways to really get a feel for what actually happened.
Listen, the real crime here was the decor in the house. I'm just going to tell you right now. Some of that wallpaper, I love that time period. But holy shit.
The wood paneling and the linoleum floors and the shag carpet. And how about the sofas with the deer scene on it? The velvet.
Gorgeous.
Oh, yes.
I mean, it screams 70s. If you want to see a house that screams 70s before there were screams of murder, check out the Amityville
And that was
house.
A big deal back then. These people had a little bit of money. You know, they're living in Amityville on Long Island.
Right, in a large house. It was a colonial house, so it was not small. It had a full third floor, and that's where apparently Ronnie had his bedroom and blah, 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 blah. But yeah, I mean, they did have a lot of money. They had a lot of nice things. So then, like your question again, what happened there? What happened with Ronnie that this took place? Why didn't the other family members hear it while these shots were going off? Yes, it was a large house, but I mean, you would think a gunshot would ring out pretty loudly. And the neighbors, because of the situation of the house, okay, when the house was built, it was not built like a normal colonial wood with the wide section facing the road. It was actually built the other way with the shorter edge so that less land would have to be purchased in order to place it there. So you could buy a smaller lot, save a little bit of money, put more money into the house. So literally the driveway for this house and the driveway for the house right next to it butted up next to one another. They were almost one driveway. That's how close these houses were kind of wedged in together. How did somebody in the next house not hear it?
I can hear where I live. I have houses very close to me on the side. We have a beautiful backyard, but we're very close on the side. Your
Right.
typical, suburban home. And I can hear when they take their garbage out. I can hear when their TV's too loud. You can hear these things. How can you be that close to somebody and not hear anything? There are a lot of ideas that float around. I think that the fact that they did toxicologies and found no drugs, no alcohol,
Very
nothing
interesting. Yep.
is very, very interesting. I'm one of those people that's very, as immersed in the paranormal as I am, I tend to be on the skeptical side. I tend to feel as if we need to eliminate everything else before we actually start to think, hey, there could be something paranormal going on here.
Yeah.
I do that with everything that happens, everything we experience. That's my first inclination. But when you're taking away all of these different possible variables, sometimes you do have to just look at something like a paranormal event. Now, we're talking about, and I think I told you this before, we're talking about land in New York State. New York State, one of the most history-rich regions of the United States of America. And you're talking about bloodshed upon bloodshed. The Indians, you're talking about wars, you're talking about death, you're talking about Indians living on this land that, were essentially, they lived by a different way of life than we did. They had different rituals and different customs, and there was negativity, and they had shaman. There is energy in the land itself. I had somebody come to me a couple months ago and tell me she thought that her home was haunted. And she is right on one of the most historical plots of land in our county. And I said, it may not even be the house itself. It could be the land holding that energy, that negative energy. Don't forget Albert Einstein. Energy cannot be created nor destroyed. Where is that energy being held? Everything creates energy, so, which will tie into what we're talking about later. But, there is possibility that land is holding such negative energy. It's just waiting to come out.
Well, and here's the other thing, and this kind of leads more into something that we've been involved with here in the last couple of days. But, other families have moved in to this home after the Lutzes, after the Defeos, and have had nothing go on. And they basically say everything's bullshit, everything's hogwash. There's nothing bad about this house. And then the question becomes, okay, it's not the house. Maybe it's the land. Maybe there's something that we don't know about Ronnie, about maybe some abilities that he may or may not have had to be open to energies and all that kind of stuff. And so maybe it came to him from the area. I mean, we don't know. Some things happened. Some of it seems to be historically recorded and some of it not. So the question lies, where do you start looking? And again, that lends to something that you and I have kind of gone through the last couple of days, where we were in the same situation where something was reported, seemed a little crazy. Was it the house? Maybe, maybe not. Is this person nuts? Or maybe she's just very sensitive. I don't know. But yeah, it really you start thinking back not only on the Amityville case, but other cases like it. Like, was the house haunted? Was it something else? Was it somebody in the house not physically doing something, but their energy being a part of it? I mean, it opens up a whole new realm of questions. And
I think it does an extreme disservice to the people involved to immediately dismiss it and say that there was nothing there. Because I don't feel as if there was nothing there. Just because you don't experience something does not mean that there's not something there. You and I know we're open, so we know when there's energy. Not everybody can feel that. Not everybody can feel it on the same level. So where we might be disturbed by something, somebody else may say, oh, there's nothing going on. How did we grow up? Thinking we were crazy because people around us couldn't feel the same things that we felt. So what was our first inclination? Well, I must be crazy. I must be depressed. Right.
Yep.
So, we don't know, and we can talk about our theories on it at the end of this, but, we don't know what actually happened. We'll never know what actually really happened. There's no way of knowing. But when you have two families who are experiencing extreme distress and trauma in the same location, there's something going on there. It can't be just ignored. I hate when people say, it was just a bunch of bullshit. It was a hoax. It was a big hoax. I don't believe it was a big hoax. Chris Quarantino, I'll talk about the Lutz family in just a second, but Chris Quarantino, who is Kathy Lutz's son, one of her sons, and he put out a book, and he talks about how, his experiences, and how can you not believe somebody who truly, when you listen to him, he to this day is traumatized by what he went through as a child. You don't put on a major hoax, be a part of it as a child, and 40 years later still act traumatized by what you've been through.
And not just from the paranormal realm. There was abuse and stuff going on in the family, which may or may not have helped fuel all the other stuff going on.
Yes. It's all... Okay, but let me talk about the Lutz family real quick so we can fill everybody. Let's talk about the Lutzes.
And now the Lutz family.
So the Lutz family bought this house in December of 1975. George and Kathy Lutz. They got it for what they considered to be a bargain price at the time, $80,000, which in essence, it was an extremely reasonable price. The property not only had the large house, but it had a pool and a boathouse, and it was on the canal. On Long Island, at that time, $80,000 was just unheard of.
And that price basically was based on not the fact that the house was in disrepair or anything like that. It was based on the fact that there was a huge, very televised, very, very well-known murder in the house.
Exactly. Multiple killings in the same house. So right. The couple had just gotten married. They were really excited. They thought, oh, this is our dream house.
First problem right there.
They didn't know what they were in for after that. It was all downhill from there, right? But they had their dog Harry with them, and Kathy had the 3 kids from her previous marriage, Danny, who was 9, Christopher, Quarantino, who was 7, and Missy, who was 5. And what's really weird about this, like as if it's not weird enough, Todd, one really weird thing that I didn't know about until recently, I don't know why I never knew this, when they bought the house, they paid an extra $400 to get all of the Defeo's furniture with it.
See, yeah, well, that's the other part of it, and I was going to mention that. I mean, when I was making fun of the interior and stuff like that, it wasn't necessarily the Lutzes who had the money. It was the fact that the family before them had acquired so many things and had, yeah. And so they kept all this stuff.
All of this stuff in the house from murdered people.
Now, first of all, okay, let's just say you take a step back and go, well, it's just stuff. It can't have energy, no bad luck. Okay, let's say you believe that. Would you want their stuff in your house?
No.
Like even like a bed that somebody was murdered in? I don't know. I might choose a couple of items, but even if you take the paranormal thoughts out of it and I, scared of I just don't think I'd want people's
stuff.
It's creepy. Even if there wasn't a frickin' murder, I don't want Grandma Jones's, side table in my living room. I just don't.
Even my grandma, when she passed away, I have a few things of hers left over the years, but I had her bedroom set for a while and everything. But that was a little bit different because she was a family member. But
still,
why would I want? And I'm a believer that I love antiques. I love to antique shop, but I rely on my feelings when I go into a shop because if I feel weird about something as much as I love it, I will not buy it.
Yeah.
I am a believer that someone's energy can go with it. And I just don't feel comfortable with that idea. So all of that stuff was there. Everything can, what's the word I want? Everything can take in energy. We take in energy. Everything takes in energy. Why can't it be transferred? It's got to go somewhere. It can't be destroyed. Energy can't be destroyed. So it's got to go somewhere. It's got to be managed. It's got to be moved. It's got to be transferred somewhere. So why can't it go with belongings? I would never have done that. And they went into the house knowing full well what had happened. I just would not have done that. And especially when we found out that they weren't very religious to begin with. So, I guess I can understand. George was non-practicing Methodist. Kathy was a non-practicing Catholic. So there wasn't much religion or belief in their household to begin with.
Right.
So they may have gone in thinking, oh, this is a bargain, $400, we can get everything. I wouldn't be like that. That would not be.
What are you? Are you a non-practicing what?
I was born and raised Catholic, but consider myself more spiritual now. Mm. I still hold some of my Catholic beliefs. I'm not a fan of the church itself. I never have been, except when I was 7 and my grandfather would take me to church every Sunday for years.
So I do have a question for you, and people need to know when we have this podcast, we don't agree on everything. So you may throw a red flag at me. I may throw a red flag at you. What's your point in bringing up the fact that they had no religion really in their family?
Well, I think that regardless of what your religion is, I think that belief in something can help you be stronger and more focused. You know, faith can be strong. If you have faith in something, a lot of things are about intent. So if you have faith in something, if your intentions are strong, I think it helps you in some ways.
And I don't want to get ahead of you, but I think that some of the intentions and some of the beliefs that George Lutz was involved with, according to his son, Chris, may have also helped create some of what was going on while they were there. I
agree. And George, go ahead. You know the story. Go ahead.
No,
I think that's a good place to start talking about that.
Well, apparently, according to Chris, the individual that you were, the son that you were talking about, who lived his life there as a child and kind of went through what was going on, you know, a lot of people took aim at the family saying they were making this stuff up. And Chris has come forward and said, here's some of the stuff I went through. And his take on it, my understanding of his take on it, is that George, in his library and the books that he read and the things that he kind of held true, got into a lot of dark magic kind of stuff. And it's possible that George was actually practicing some of that within the house and actually brought some of that stuff into the house because of the things he was reading and the rituals he was doing and because of his energy in general. So, you know, there's where I stay. Okay, so the Defeo family had its tragedy. Maybe something was involved that came into that situation because somebody was open there, or maybe they were doing some, you know, black magic or something like that. And then another family, other than the Lutzes, could have moved in. You and I could have bought the house together if I wasn't like 5 at the time. And we could have bought the house and nothing could have happened, even though we were sensitive and all that kind of stuff. We were young at the time. But you get the right combination of people to buy that house, the right energies, the right talents or gifts, and all of a sudden you've got a whirlwind of problems. And I kind of think that's maybe what happened with the Lutzes.
Ding, ding, ding. There's something we agree on.
Ding, ding, ding.
I said ding, ding, ding. You said ding, ding, ding to me the other day.
$10 pyramid. Here's your house.
We need a sound effect. But you did that to me the other day, so I figured I'd do it to you. But yes, I don't for a second believe that negativity wasn't involved in this. My thought is, and I'm big on energy, my thought is that in some way, not only did Ronnie Defeo, I look at it as a perfect storm. Ronnie Defeo may or may not have been open. I think possibly he was. And I'll tell you, part of it, I think, is because of the physical, emotional, and mental abuse going on in that family.
Yep.
And there are many, many stories that are actually documented of the abuse that went on in that household. The mafia actually was involved. I want to say that Ron Sr.'s sister was married to somebody in the mob. And so there was a lot. Ron Sr. himself owned a car dealership, which I feel like, just you and me, you know, just between us, I feel like there was no way they could have, and everybody else, there was no way they could afford that home at the time. If there wasn't something, yes. If there wasn't something else going on there. God only knows what those kids were actually privy to. And I feel like it was the perfect storm in that situation. Ronnie was probably open, at least to some extent. You've got all of that abuse.
Under pressure from other family members outside the immediate family to do something.
Right. Who knows? And I think, my feelings, but my feelings are that if there was something extremely negative to begin with attached either to that house or that land, that somehow he invited that in. He invited that in because you can't explain away the fact that this man shot 10 times with a house less than 15 feet away and nothing but a dog barking, and not one person heard it. Not one person heard it in that entire neighborhood. We just Google Earthed it last week. We see how close those houses are. I really, truly feel like it was invited in. I think that when it came to Kathy and George and the kids, I really believe Chris Quarantino when he says that George was doing something. George was doing something. It invited it in. You and I could go to a home, and if we're not allowing ourselves, we've learned to put up walls. We've learned to block things because we have to. It's survival. But if we're not inviting it in, it's not going to be able to come in. In the Catholic Church, demonic possession is usually weak people who mentally, physically, emotionally are going through something that makes it easier for them to be preyed upon. You're somehow inviting it. You're allowing it in. I think that George did. I think that Ronnie Jr. did. That's why a lot of times in the next several years, people weren't having issues. They weren't in that same mindset. They weren't in that same type of world as those two families were in that allowed that negativity. The energy didn't go anywhere. I'll tell you right now, the energy is still there. But it can't feed on anybody because they're not allowing it to. There's not a perfect storm going on. Do I think in 10 years somebody could come in there that allows it and you'll have the same situation? I sure as hell do. I really feel.
Do you think the energy there, but do you think it's tied to the house, or do you think it's tied to the area? Or
I've gotten a feeling with the land. But I'll tell you what. I feel like it's always been tied to the land. Mm-hmm. But when the Defeo situation happened, it took over that home. It took over the home. Because now you've got trauma. Now you don't have trauma just on land, not in land. Now you've got trauma within a structure. It's going to be in there. I bet if you and I walked in there, we would have to sit down because it's still in there.
Well, yeah, especially if all that really bad furniture and paneling were in there.
We'd have to go in blindfolded.
Actually, I like that kind of stuff. So
I do too.
Own.
And I was reminded just now by looking at some of the pictures on this website. Do you remember the name for the house? Because the DeFeos built the house and they gave the house in that little plot a little name. Don't you look it up.
I'm not. I can't think of it, but I know what I remember hearing about it, but I don't know what it's called.
It's called High Hopes.
That's right. Yes. High hopes.
Like somebody said, okay, we're going into 2021 and a lot of people go, this is my year. I'm going to do this, this, and this. And somebody on Twitter, I think, said, okay, nobody claimed 2021 is theirs. Let's walk in really slowly, take a look around, and just take a couple of breaths before we determine that this is going to be our year, because we don't know quite.
I'm not taking anything for granted.
High hopes. Right. You build a house and you call it High Hopes. You're screwed right there.
Yeah, you've done yourself in to begin with. But yeah, I seem to remember, because I've done a lot of research over the years on this, not recently, but I seem to remember that it isn't the only weird things that have happened in that area, though. Okay, so I think there were a few drownings that were kind of suspicious and weird. I seem to remember some stuff like that. I'll have to see. I'll put some stuff up if I can think of it. I seem to remember that there were a few incidents that happened in that neighborhood that were kind of weird.
Okay.
Not necessarily the house related, and we don't know what the neighbors have experienced. Nobody talks. Did you notice how nobody talks about anything ever? There's never been an interview with neighbors. There's never been an interview with anyone involved in that area at all. We don't know if they experience things. Yeah. My guess is that they are. Because it's not just that specific plot of land. The history is everywhere. So my thought is that they are probably experiencing things, but nobody wants to talk about it. And I can understand. You say one thing and now the Amityville horror case has been opened back up again. And, you've got a million reporters all over your front lawn.
Well, of course. And the movie came out in the late 70s. And then there was another movie with Ryan Reynolds, which, by the way, this movie should never have been remade. And it was freaking horrible. So don't remake a movie like this because it doesn't need to be made. But, so the movie came out in this all kind of came out in the late 70s. And to this day, there are people who drive past just to stop and see the house. I'd be one of them, definitely.
I told you, road trip. What can you imagine if we go down there, what we would feel? Like, I can't even imagine what I would feel down there.
Well, here's what we would do. We'd park across the street. We're going to take a laptop and we'll do a podcast from across the street.
Oh, my God.
And paint the picture for everybody and that kind of stuff. Yeah, I mean, I understand it, but literally that's why people don't want to talk. I mean, because there's still people who check this out. There's people like me who go on
Google Earth and have to find out where the house is and where it's situated.
No, but it's true. That's my whole point, is they probably aren't even experiencing anything remotely close to what happened in that house. Right. But my feeling about this situation is that they're all experiencing things. Sometimes, regardless of whether you're open to something or not. And I'm willing to bet that the people who live in that house have experienced things over the years, but they're not going to talk about it either. And it's probably nowhere near what happened with the two families. But I'm willing to bet that things have moved, or noises or sounds or voices have happened over the years. Maybe they play them down and ignore them and don't think of them. We know cases where things like that have happened. My gut feeling is that that's still going on today, just not anywhere near what it did.
Question for you, and you may not have an answer. And again, this is when we do these podcasts, we're not sitting here with piles of information and we've read up on everything. It's just our experience of going through what we know and what we've, dealt with. So Kathy Lutz, you said she was a non-practicing
Catholic.
Right. Okay. So she was Catholic, because I was going to say, why would she turn to the Catholic Church?
Right.
That seemed odd to me, but knowing that she was a non-practicing Catholic, then I understand why she would do that.
And there's always been something about George that didn't sit right with me. He was involved in a lot of paranormal conventions and podcasts over the years. And there's something about George that didn't sit right with me. Not necessarily that he was making this stuff up. He was more...
he never took responsibility for what he knew he did to make those events actually come to fruition.
That's it. Right there.
I've always felt like, okay, maybe some of this stuff that we have heard about has been exaggerated, but if something did happen there, that's my gut feeling on it. That's my feeling on it. But I think he's never said, okay, this stuff did happen.
Right. And that brings up a couple of points. Number one, I don't believe that, and most people accept this idea, not everything that was in the books or the movies actually happened. Kathy and George would even go on to say later on that it was, it's movies, it's entertainment,
right,
they've got to make money. So some of it was exaggerated. Some of it was kind of thrown in there to make it. But the main ideas have always remained the same. There's never been too much variation on the main ideas and the main stories. I remember you remember Phil Donahue.
How could you forget Phil Donahue?
I know. I loved him. I really did.
I still do.
I love Phil Donahue.
Who he's married to, right?
No. Oh, that girl.
Yeah, that girl is right.
Yes.
Yeah, Marlo Thomas.
Thomas. Yes. Yep. I used to watch that show too.
Right.
We're so old. But he had the Lutzes on one of his shows once. And this followed them. A lot of people don't realize that this actually followed them after they moved. They moved to California. And I remember vividly Kathy saying that they came out of their apartment one day, and they had bicycles, and there were like snakes wrapped all around the bicycles. And they were in a place where you wouldn't normally see. They were poisonous snakes. Things like that would happen to them for quite a while after they moved. Like just things that wouldn't happen to a normal person. Strange events would happen to them. So Kathy, I think, died in the mid-2000s from cancer. But they divorced in the late 90s, I think, but they stayed friendly with each other. But she would tell stories about how this thing actually followed them. They would still get negative things happen to them, strange things that wouldn't happen to anybody else, but they would get it for quite a while. So it's an interesting case. I don't necessarily, if you don't look at the movie and the book, it's a lot more intriguing for the paranormal world than, if you take the entertainment out of it, which a lot of people don't. A lot of people want to go by what the movie and the book did.
Yeah, I doubt there was blood oozing out of the walls.
No.
I doubt that happened.
One of the things that I always felt was really interesting about the book, and it should have been a foreshadowing of my interest in home construction and architecture in general, but one of the best parts of the book for me was actually seeing the blueprint of the house. And it showed you where all the rooms were. in the home and all that. That was really interesting to me. So when I finally got to see the movie and what the supposed house looked like and stuff like that, that was always kind of interesting. But it was always interesting that the energy came from the third floor, you know?
Yeah, because that's where the kids saw Jody. That's where they saw the eyes looking in, the red eyes looking in at them. That seemed to be the focal point. Do you remember the picture? And I love and hate this picture at the same time. The picture that was taken, I think, on the second floor landing of the little boy looking.
That was with the Warrens, wasn't it, during one of their investigations?
That was because Lorraine said she told them to take a picture because she felt something. At the top, they asked her to go up the stairs and see what she felt. And she said, take a picture now. And that's the picture that I'm getting the chills as I talk about this. Because that picture is pretty amazing from a lot of different aspects.
And there's a lot of people who refute it and say, well, it was the son of one of the investigators and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I don't care. In this realm, I don't care what you do. By the way, Winston's in my studio with me right now. And I think he wants to go out of the room because he's standing next to me by the heater. But there's always going to be people that say it's bullshit. But yes, that picture itself is pretty creepy.
Yeah, it is. It's very creepy. And it's very well defined. But
yet, it looks like somebody standing there.
Yeah.
I mean, it literally.
But yet it doesn't necessarily look like a, quote, real child is standing there. Like a solid real child is standing there. It's pretty intriguing.
You know what that kind of reminds me of, again, that kind of ties into what we've been experiencing the last couple of days with the picture of what appears to be 3 or 4 individuals.
Yes.
And one of them being a young person, maybe in their teens.
I got 16. I got the age of 16.
And I've been told by somebody else maybe between 15 and 17. So guess what? 16's right there.
Yep.
Right?
So that would work.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the kind of stuff it reminds me of when you get some sort of evidence or you get something that shouldn't be there because it wasn't there in your eyesight, but you see it in a photograph or a video or whatever.
Well, speaking of, that kind of thing, we did experience something this week that we've never done before. And we did it together, which was really cool and really great. And we kind of joined forces. Wonder Twin powers activate.
I always thought it sucked that the boy of the twins, the girl could be any animal she wanted.
I know.
How
I
cool
love
is
that.
Right? Mm-hmm. And the other guy could be frickin' water.
I know. It's true. I loved
what a
Sheena. Wait, Sheena, and what was his name?
Not Sheena, was it?
I thought it was Sheena. Are you looking it up?
Computer in front. Yeah, let's look it up. You want me to, or do you want to? I will.
All right.
So you can start telling the story while I look up the Wonder Twins.
All right. So this was what day? Tuesday or Wednesday? Tuesday.
I don't remember it.
I don't even know. So
Zan is the boy.
Zan.
And Jaina.
Jaina. Okay.
And they had the monkey. I think the monkey's name was Gleek or something.
Yes, it was. It was something like that. And I always wanted to be the cheetah. I thought that was like so super cool.
Well, I mean, I certainly didn't want to be the guy.
You could be a bucket of ice.
What the hell?
But in the end, they worked together and they solved the problem.
Yeah, I think she did most of the work, though. He could become a sheet of ice and then somebody slip on and fall on their ass or something,
What can I say?
The day.
I became a bucket of ice cubes. So he was a glacier once, I think. This is the most ridiculous.
It's just the stupidest thing that you could be if you're a super person, a wonder person.
When you're making this up, why would you make somebody be a form of water?
I don't know.
Like, I get the animal part, but why wouldn't he?
Form of energy, because then he could take fire, he could take air, he could take anything, right? Sound. Right. He could be sound waves and knock somebody over.
Exactly.
But water?
I don't understand. Now I'm going to have to go look it up like on YouTube and watch some of these episodes because it's just going to crack me up trying to remember some of the things that he was.
I think he was he was the black sheep of the family, very very embarrassed by the superpowers he was, and very emasculating for him, to be honest with you.
He was
and then
form
she
of
probably
ice
picked
cubes.
The outfits because she picked purple too. Like, not only is it bad that all your superpower is you can change the water, but now you got to wear purple too. Poor guy.
He was like form of ice cubes,
Yeah.
She's like form of a cheetah, and he's like form of a glacier.
A glass of water. A nice cool glass
he
of
was
water.
a glass of water. I remember a glass of water. And I'm thinking to myself, what in God's name is a glass of water going to do against, this monster? I don't
Dude's
know.
probably wearing panties under that too, but I won't get into that whole story.
So now we talk pretty much all day, every day. We're always in contact with each other.
Unfortunately. And listen, she's the bane of my existence.
Whatever.
She is the cheetah to my glass of water.
Whatever. You're the glass of water to my cheetah, buddy.
Pretty much.
So.
This is the Sandy and Toddcast.
So that was just over a year ago, episode 2 or 3 or something like that from season 1, right?
Yeah, I think it was episode 2. We came out guns a-blazing. And
we blew all the topics in like 3 weeks, and then we were done. We had nothing else to do.
Time. We were all excited. We were like, "All right, let's talk about Amityville next week," and we did a great job. It's just funny listening to us then, as opposed to now, and
why? Because I haven't had a chance to hear the audio itself, but I'll listen to it once we publish this podcast. And it's been a while since I've listened to the original. What's so different between us then and now?
I don't know. We sound, well, first of all, our audio is different because we've changed platforms. And I think we've just sort of found we've sort of found our place in this whole thing, because everybody does a podcast. There's so many millions and millions of podcasts out there. And I edit podcasts. I produce podcasts for a living. So I've heard 1,000,001 of them. And not everybody can hit a home run, and some people do. And it's interesting for me to watch my repeat clients every week or every month and watch how they develop. And so I have an ear for it now, and I listened to us then and I listen to us now, and we've just sort of found our groove. And now we're just so like, we know what we want to do. We know what we're about. We found our place, and we're just so much. I think we've developed so much in the past year, and it makes me really happy. But it's fun to listen back to last year's audio, episode 2, and really see the difference. So
we're going to do that a little bit this season, where we're going to go back, because that very first season, we were just kind of getting started, really just testing the waters. We weren't necessarily promoting all of our podcasts, etc. So there's a lot of them that don't have a ton of listens, and yet the topics, the stuff we talk about is really good.
Yeah.
And so we thought, this season, let's revisit some of that stuff and flashback and check out some of the actual podcasts from back then. So.
Yeah, so it was a lot of fun to do this for this episode and kind of revisit the Amityville. My thoughts are exactly the same today as they were a year ago. Nothing's really changed. But I do have a lot of respect for Chris Quarantino and his siblings in this mess. And what they went through, not just at the house, but the aftermath, which is still going on 40 years later. So much respect and much love to Chris for being able to deal with what he's been dealing with over the years.
The original clump of Amityville movies, 1, 2, and 3D, I think that's all there was in that.
I think so.
2 and 3 are not nearly as good. 3 is very cheesy to a certain extent.
Yeah.
But I still love them. But the Ryan Reynolds version can go away. It was never meant to be made. It never needed to be made. Whatever. Ryan Reynolds with his shirt off and all this. And all the women are like, oh.
Although I love Ryan Reynolds, don't get me wrong.
I think he's funny.
This whole movie didn't have a place in the story. It just didn't have a place in the story. And, it's a lot to me like the Conjuring movie now. The franchise, the Conjuring franchise, where they're movies. So they're not going to be exactly the way they happen in real life. But you have to take the idea that these are movies and just enjoy them.
Yeah.
Let yourself be scared. Let yourself go through the emotions and just love them, because they're great movies. They're great movies. And regardless of what happened in the Amityville house, what didn't happen in the Amityville house, at the end of the day, that's not my story to tell. And it's not my story to truly take apart 100% and say, this is what truly happened. I can only give my opinion and my thoughts, but I feel for the people who went through it because that's pretty bad. It's pretty bad.
My final thought on the newer version of Amityville, the other reason why I hated the Ryan Reynolds version is because they created a house that was nothing like the actual house. They took a side view of the colonial that was the Amityville house, and they plopped it on the front of like a farmhouse kind of, and it's like, so because I love architecture, I'm sitting here, that doesn't make any sense. What are they doing here? Look what they've done to this movie. And it's, that
whole movie was just off. It was just wrong. It was wrong 10 minutes into the movie. And I was like debating with myself, do I watch the rest of this movie or do I not watch the rest of this movie? And so, yeah, I agree with you 100%.
I only remember two parts of that remake. Number one, how messed up the house was. And number two, Ryan Reynolds in a boat and his eyes turn red. And that's all I remember. That's all I remember.
And that's pretty sad. That's pretty sad, But I could tell you every single thing that happened in the original Amityville horror movie.
I can sing you the theme right now if you want me to.
So, would you like to?
No.
So, yeah, but yeah. So take them with a grain of salt and just enjoy the really good ones, but understand that it's a movie, and in the end, nobody knows what truly happened.
We have got 2 podcasts coming up that are going to knock your socks off. If you are into anything paranormal, anything cryptids, if you like talking about aliens, if you like talking about Sasquatch, I almost said Sleestack, but that's from Land of the Lost.
Land of the Lost, another one of my favorite shows.
That was so bad. That was so
It was
cheesy.
Awful. Will and Holly, I know, but I loved it.
But if you're into that stuff, we chatted with a gentleman by the name of Jason Offit, and he is an author, and he does some TV, and he does all these interviews and stuff like that. And we had a chance to sit down with him, and it was just fascinating. I can't wait to put those two together. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, we're going to break it into 2 parts because it was just so much great information, and we sort of want to give our take on everything after the fact. So we're going to break it into 2 parts. It'll be next week and the week after. You guys are going to love Jason. We love Jason. We already want him back. And as you've noticed, we're taking a little bit of a different approach this season. And one of the things that I really wanted to talk a lot about, Todd, was cryptids this season. And maybe get into things like UFOs and all of that other stuff, skinwalkers, things that we haven't really talked about yet. And Jason is the perfect guest for that. So I'm really excited.
You were bringing up topics that I had no idea about that night with him. And he's just talking. I mean, he's got all this knowledge in his head. And it's like, okay,
I love talking about things that I'm passionate about with people who are just as passionate about it as I am.
And this should tell you she's passionate about skinwalkers. So there you go. If she were on a dating website right now, it would be called, passionate about skinwalkers. But
they're fascinating. And I love the Native American stories and legends that get passed down, and maybe I think some of them are actually true. And so skinwalkers come from that. And I'm just fascinated. So we'll talk all things, paranormal, cryptid, UFO, everything in the world with Jason Offit in the next 2 episodes.
So you remember Land of the Lost. Do you remember Sigmund the Sea Monster?
Yes,
I do. Oh my gosh, right?
I remember Sigmund.
Sigmund the Sea Monster and Johnny and Scott, our friends.
That was our wheelhouse, Todd. I mean, we were kids back then. I mean, that was our time. The phone
would ring and they go, "Shello." Remember?
Yes. Oh, and it's so funny because in last season's Amityville episode, we just talked about, and I kept it in our audio, about none other than the Wonder Twins.
Oh, is that where that conversation started? Okay.
Yeah, so I kept it in just for fun. So, all right,
Sounds
everybody, make sure that you follow us on our Facebook page, The Sandy and Toddcast. We do have a great group, Stay Weirdos, Friends of The Sandy and Toddcast. Just make sure you join that group. We have so much fun in there. It's a safe space to share your thoughts and ideas. Please make sure that you leave us a review and tell everybody how much you love us and how interesting we are and fun. And that just helps move us up to the top
so
of
beggy.
the list.
Just tell us how interesting we are, please.
Tell us how much you love us. And that's all I've got for now, but thank you so much for your support. We also are doing a side project called the Empathic Harry Podcast. A new episode of that will be coming out soon, so make sure you like that page as well.
All right. All for the Sandy and Toddcast. It's been a fun one. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.